Good morning, students. This is Richa Kumar. Today we shall study the second chapter from your English textbook Flamingo. The title of the chapter is Lost Spring: Stories of Stolen Childhood, and the author is Anees Jung. Let us first talk about the author Anees Jung. Anees Jung is an Indian author, journalist and columnist who writes for major newspapers in India and abroad. She was born in Rourkela in 1944 and spent most of her growing up years in Hyderabad. She belongs to an aristocratic family. Her father was a renowned scholar and poet, and her mother and brother are also well-known Urdu poets. Anees Jung first came into the limelight with the publication of Unveiling India in 1987. It is a travel diary that focuses on interviews with women, mostly Indian Muslim women who live behind the parda. The extract that we are going to study is from her book titled Lost Spring: Stories of Stolen Childhood. Here she talks about the poor children who are deprived of basic amenities of life. Now let us discuss the theme of this chapter. The title is The Lost Spring. As we all know, spring is the season associated with optimism and hope. It also works as a metaphor for the childhood stage of our life. This extract deals with the abject poverty into which some unfortunate children grow up, deprived of all basic amenities of life. Such children are introduced to the rough side of life at a very tender age. Their deplorable conditions force them to miss the simple joyful moments of childhood, and so their childhood or spring gets lost. This is because of their poor socio-economic conditions. These children are not given the opportunity of schooling and are compelled to start working early in life. The indifference of society, the oppression of the political parties, and the neglect from the upper classes makes their lives even more miserable. Anees Jung says that all children should get the opportunity of a good education. She also advocates the enforcement of strict laws against child labor by the government. And she says that all children should be allowed to enjoy the spring of their lives. Now coming to the text, there are the stories of two young boys who belong to the deprived section of society in this chapter. The first story is titled Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garbage. It is a story of a rag picker called Sahib-e-Alam. Every morning the writer sees a young rag picker boy who visits the garbage dump near her house and searches for gold in it. The writer uses the word gold ironically because it's a garbage heap and no such gold can be found over there. But for the rag pickers, gold signifies anything of value which they can find. His home was in Dhaka, in the middle of lush green fields, but he says that they left it many years ago and he does not remember it anymore. His mother had told him that there were many storms which had destroyed their homes and fields, and so they left their home and shifted to Delhi in search of gold. The writer again says looking for gold in the big city. So gold here refers to something precious which was not available in their hometown. It could be anything like shoes, money, bags, etc. for the children, and food, clothing, shelter, or a means of survival for their parents. The boy searches for such precious things in the garbage dumps. One day the writer questions Sahib and asks him why he shuffles through the garbage, and he replies that he has nothing else to do. The writer suggests that he should go to school, but then she realizes that her advice is meaningless for the poor boy. He replies that there are no schools in the area where he lives, and she says that if she opens a school, would he attend it? He agrees at once, and after a few days when he meets her, he runs up to her and asks whether her school is ready. The writer is embarrassed and she feels ashamed at having made a false promise. She had said it as a joke and had never intended to actually open a school for him. So she felt really ashamed of herself. But Sahib was not hurt because he was used to such false promises. They are in fact a part of his everyday life. He was surrounded by such false promises made by everyone around him, like the politicians and the netas who would come, to get votes from these poor people, and they would make empty promises to them. Sahib's world was as empty as the promises which were made to him because no promise was ever fulfilled. After months of knowing him, Anis Jung asked him what his name was, and he announced very proudly that his name was Sahib-e-Alam. He didn't know that the meaning of his name is Lord of the Universe, and if he did know the meaning of it, he would find it difficult to believe. Anis Jung says that it is so ironic that a person who has the name Sahib-e-Alam is a barefoot rag picker living in drastic situations. She says that he runs around with his army of friends who appear in the morning like birds and disappear at noon. She had started recognizing Sahib and all of his friends as she had been seeing them every day since the past few months. One day she asked one of them why he wasn't wearing any chappals. The boy simply and very casually said that his mother did not get his chappals down from the top shelf, and as they were beyond his reach, he did not wear them. Another boy who was wearing different shoes on each foot said that even if the first boy's mother would have given him the chappals, he would have thrown them away. He meant to say that they were not wearing footwear because they didn't want to wear them. The writer asked the second boy for the reason why he was wearing a different shoe on each foot. He did not reply, and he tried to hide his feet because he felt embarrassed by that question. A third boy spoke that he was eager to get a pair of shoes and he had never owned one all his life. Now over here the writer takes the example of shoes to highlight the condition of these boys. They search the garbage dumps looking for such precious things. Then she also recounts one of her experiences when she was traveling across the country, and she says she had seen many children walking barefoot in the cities as well in the villages. They reasoned that they were barefoot not due to the lack of money, but because being barefoot was a tradition for them. She wonders whether the reason of it being a tradition is just an excuse to hide the fact that they are so poor that they cannot afford footwear. She also remembers a story of a man from Udupi. He says that as a young boy he used to go past a temple which was on his way to his father worked as a priest. And he would pray to the god to bless him with a pair of shoes. After 30 years, the writer visited the town and the temple, and now the place was nearly empty. There was a new priest who lived in the backyard of the temple, and his condition was much better than the earlier priest. She saw a young boy come running, and he was wearing a school uniform, socks and shoes. The writer wants to say that the financial position of the priest at the temple had improved over the last 30 years. Now he could afford shoes for his children. She was reminded of another boy who got a pair of shoes. He prayed to the goddess that he may never lose the shoes that he had got. This shows us that the underprivileged value anything that they get because they have been longing for it. She says that the condition of the priest improved, but the condition of the rag pickers in Simapuri has remained miserable since they came there. Sahib and the other rag pickers lived in Simapuri, which is an impoverished garbage dump, a slum area on the outskirts of Delhi. The people over here are all impoverished and can barely manage to get enough food to keep themselves alive. The writer then goes on to describe Simapuri, the area where these rag picker boys live. She says that it is on the periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it metaphorically. Through this expression, she wants to say that these rag pickers, though living on the outskirts of Delhi, are far away from it because they are not able to enjoy the basic necessities and facilities of life, such as proper food, clothes, sanitation, drinking water and shelter, due to their impoverished condition. Delhi, in spite of being the capital of India where all development policies are framed, is unable to help them to improve their lifestyle and life conditions. These rag pickers had migrated from Bangladesh, and at that time the area of Simapuri had been a wasteland. But now more than 10,000 rag pickers lived there in structures made of mud with roofs made of thin sheets of plastic material. There was no sewage, drainage or running water facility in Simapur. They lived in unhygienic conditions, and all the garbage of the city was collected in that area. These pictures that you see are actual pictures from the Simapuri area. These Bangladeshi migrants started living there illegally. They occupied the area without government permission or ownership. The politicians of the area provided them ration cards in exchange for getting their votes. The writer asked a group of women who were wearing torn saris that why did they leave their homes in Dhaka? They replied that for them, satisfying the hunger of their families was most important. So they were happier living in Simapuri where at least they could get food. For those who lived there, the means of survival was rag picking. As they had been doing it for many years, they had become very adept at it and slowly had turned it into a kind of art. For them, the garbage was as precious as gold. These families searched the garbage dumps and got things which they sold in order to buy their food. For the children, the garbage dumps were more than a means of survival. Sahib was happy to say that sometimes he found a rupee or even 10 rupee note in the dump. As sometimes they could find money in the garbage, they kept on searching in the hope of finding more. For the children, the garbage dump was a means of fulfilling their dreams, although partially. See, all children do have dreams. The underprivileged children often do not find means of fulfilling them. For the parents of these children, the garbage was a means of aiding survival by providing the basics such as food, clothing and shelter through the money that they got through the sale of it. The author points out that Saheb appears to be quite a happy young boy, and when he talks about the money that he sometimes finds while searching through the garbage, his eyes really light up. She also talks of another day when she saw him standing by the fence of a club. He was watching a tennis game being played by two young men. Saheb said that he liked the game but he could not play it. He also told her that sometimes when the club would be closed, he would go inside and play on the swings inside the club. The guard would allow him to do that. The author also noticed that Saheb was wearing tennis shoes that day, but they seemed to be out of place and they were at odds with the rest of his dress, which was torn and worn out. She asked him what he was doing wearing those shoes, and he tried to justify himself by saying that someone had given them to him. She, however, could figure out that he had got them from the garbage dump. She says that they must have been thrown away by a boy from a rich family who didn't want to wear them anymore because they were torn. But Saheb was not bothered by the fact that the shoes were torn, and he had no problem in wearing them, as he could not afford anything better than that. He had walked barefoot in the garbage, and to wear shoes, even if they had a hole, was like a dream fulfilled for him. Saheb's dream of wearing shoes had been partially fulfilled, but his desire to play tennis would never be fulfilled. One morning the writer met Saheb, who was on his way to a milk booth. He was holding a steel container. He told her that he had got a job at the nearby tea stall. He would earn 800 rupees a month and get his meals too. The writer asked him if he liked the job, as she could see that he had lost his carefree look. Saheb was secure working in the tea stall, but he didn't like the job there. He was burdened with the responsibility of contributing to his family's income. The bag that he used to carry used to be his own, and he was free to roam around wherever he wanted to. But now he was carrying his master's container, and along with it was the responsibility of reporting to his master. He looked sad, and he seemed to have lost all the joy and wonderment that he felt while searching for gold in the garbage dumps. Now we come to the second story in this chapter, that is titled I Want to Drive a Car. It is a story of Mukesh, who is another child labourer from Firozabad, which is the center of the bangle making industry in India. He and his entire family have worked in the glass making industry since generations. They are exposed to various health hazards like losing their eyesight because of the glass dust and because of the poor conditions that they work in. Mukesh's grandfather has become blind due to working here. The bangle makers of Firozabad are so immune to their conditions that they do not try to get out of it. They believe that it is their destiny to always work over there. But Mukesh is different from all of them. Mukesh and other child labourers like him have a very hard time. None of them know that it is illegal for children like them to work in the glass furnaces with high temperatures in tiny cramped cells without air and light. There are more than 30,000 such children who work in these glass bangle making factories. They work for more than 8 hours a day and manage to earn just about 50 rupees at the most. They do not get time for studies and don't even know that they have the option of going to school. Their living conditions and working environments are a really sad story. Life in these cramped cells and working close to hot furnaces makes these children blind when they step into their adulthood. Each family in Firozabad is involved in bangle making, and every member of the household, whether it be a young child or an old person, is involved in the process. So many bangles are produced over here that it seems as if they are making bangles for all the women in the land. Mukesh is different from the other children who work there. He has a dream of being a motor mechanic. He insists on being his own master. He doesn't want to work for the people of the bangle making industry. His dream appears to be a fantasy because it is so far removed from his reality, which is that families in Firozabad have been stuck in the glass blowing industry since generations and they have no way out. The author asks him if he knows anything about cars. He says that he doesn't, but he's determined to learn. She then points out that the garage is far from his home, but he insists that he will walk that long distance so that he can learn the trade. The author then jests with him and asks if he would also dream of flying a plane. He's a little embarrassed by this question, but he says that no, he doesn't want to fly a plane. He is content to dream of cars that he sees on the streets of Firozabad. Anis Jung then mentions that few aeroplanes fly over Firozabad. Over here, she seems to be alluding to the fact that the young children of Firozabad do not have big dreams of soaring high in the sky. Their dreams are grounded and really small, attached to their reality. Mukesh was happy as he took the writer to his home. He felt proud as he informed her that it was being renovated, so he felt that they were better off than the other people there. They walked down the street, which was full of garbage and gave off a very bad smell. The streets were lined with slums which were very unsteady. The walls were falling apart, the doors were unsteady, there were no windows, and they were full of families where people lived along with the animals. They reminded the writer of the ancient man who lived just like animals. Mukesh stopped in front of one such door and he kicked it hard with his foot and pushed it open. The house where Mukesh lived was a partially constructed hut. In one corner there was some firewood on a stove, and his sister-in-law, who was a young girl of around about his age, was cooking the meal for them. Her eyes were full of smoke, but she was still cheerful and she smiled to see the writer. She was worthy of respect from the family as the daughter-in-law of the family, and she took care of 3 men, her husband, Mukesh, and their father. As Mukesh's father entered the house, the daughter-in-law hid behind the wall and covered her face behind her veil. It was a tradition for the daughter-in-laws to hide their face in the presence of the older male members of the family. The elder over here, that is Mukesh's father, was a poor bangle maker. He had worked hard all his life, first as a tailor and then as a bangle maker. But he was still not able to either renovate the house or send his sons to school. He had just managed to teach them the art of making bangles. Mukesh's grandmother justified her son's actions by saying that he was destined to make bangles as it had been their family profession. She had seen her husband, that is Mukesh's grandfather, become blind due to dust from polishing the glass bangles. She said that their family had got this art of bangle making from God, and so they had to carry on the tradition. They were born in a particular caste which had to follow the profession of bangle making. All their life they had just seen these glass bangles. They were everywhere, in the backyard, in the next house, in their yard, and even in the streets of the town. There were huge spiral bunches of bangles in different colors like gold, green, blue, pink, purple, in fact, in all the colors of the rainbow. Further, the writer says that there were bangles in the neglected yards also. They were dumped on handcarts for sale, which were pushed by men along the streets of Firozabad in order to sell them. Next, the writer describes the environment where these bangle makers work. They were small dark huts. The children would sit next to a line of oil lamps whose flames were unsteady. They, along with their parents, joined the pieces of colored glass into circles called bangles. As they spent a lot of time in the dark, their eyes would not adapt to the bright sunlight. In fact, many of the children lost their eyesight before gaining adulthood. The author then tells us about a young girl by the name of Savita. She was sitting with an elderly woman and they were joining pieces of glass to make bangles. Her hands moved like a machine, just like the tongs of a machine. The writer wondered if Savita knew that bangles were sacred. They were considered a good omen for a woman's marriage. She thought that Savita would realize this when she would become a bride. That day, she would cover her head with a red-colored veil, color her hands with henna, and wear red-colored bangles on her wrist. The elderly woman sitting next to Savita also became a bride many years ago. She was still wearing the glass bangles, but had lost her eyesight now. The old woman complained that she had not eaten even a seir of food. A seir is a unit of measuring quantity. The woman wanted to say that they were so poor that they never got enough food to eat. She says the only things that she had received by adopting the profession of bangle making was her poverty and hunger. The woman's husband was a very old man, and he said that he didn't know anything other than bangle making. All that he had been able to accomplish was to make a house for his family to live in. On hearing this, the writer wonders that probably the old man has achieved something which many other people have not been able to achieve. At least he has been able to secure a shelter for his family. This problem was prevalent in all the homes which carried on the profession. They did not know anything else other than bangle making, and it did not even provide them enough to eat. The young men who had entered the traditional profession also had the same complaint. With the passing of time, there was no improvement in their condition. As they had been doing hard work for countless number of years, they did not have any ability to do something else or to dream of doing something to improve their lot. On hearing their woes, the writer asks them why they don't organize themselves into a cooperative. She talked to a group of young men and tried to convince them to get out of the clutches of the cruel middlemen who had trapped their elders. The men said that if they dared to do something like that, they would be dragged and beaten up by the police and sent to jail. Their actions would be termed as unlawful. The writer felt that it was the absence of a leader which made them think that way. They couldn't dare to do things differently. They were all so tired of their constant exploitation. The men complained that it was a continuous process. Their poor condition was due to the indifference and lack of concern of the authorities for their problems. It was also due to the greed of the middlemen, and it was an injustice to them. The writer could distinguish two distinct worlds which existed in Firozabad. One was of the poor families who were stuck in their poverty and the pressure of doing their traditional work of making bangles according to the caste in which they were born. The other world that she could see was the never-ending cycle of moneylenders, middlemen, policemen, law-keepers, government officials, and politicians. Both of these worlds had forced the young boys to follow the family traditions. The youngsters got into the profession and became a part of the vicious cycle even before they realized it. If they did anything else, it meant that they were challenging both of the worlds that they knew. The young boys of Firozabad have not been brought up to be bold so that they could dare to go against the system. The writer was happy to sense that Mukesh had the spark in him. He wanted to break free from being a bangle maker. He repeated that he would be a motor mechanic. He wanted to go to a garage and learn the job. The writer mentioned that the garage was at a distance from his home. Mukesh insisted that he would walk up to it. She asked him if he dreamt of flying planes. Mukesh became silent and refused to answer. He did not know much about planes because not many planes flew over Firozabad. He had seen only cars moving around in Firozabad, and his dreams were restricted to them. He knew that if he could learn to drive a car, it would help him break out of what his grandmother believed was their destiny of staying in the bangle making business.